Imagine standing in the heat of ancient Persia, completely trapped inside, two wooden boats sealed together like a shell. Your head, hands, and feet stick out, helpless under a burning sun. Then, out of nowhere, you are forced to swallow absurd amounts of milk and honey. Sounds like a strange feast, right? But this was actually one of the most horrific sentences ever devised. According to ancient accounts, a young soldier made the fatal mistake of claiming credit for a kill that actually belonged to the king himself. His penalty was a brutal ordeal known as scaphism. The sweet milk and honey mixture caused severe internal distress, while the leftover coating smeared across his face began attracting swarms of insects under the blazing heat. The state did not directly end his life. Instead, it left him trapped while nature slowly ran its course. Historians still debate whether this was a real practice or dark propaganda designed to make enemies look ruthless. But the sheer detail of the story reveals just how far humans would go to imagine ultimate revenge. Reports claim the soldier somehow survived inside that trap for 17 full days. As centuries passed, societies shifted from open nature to rigidly controlled public rituals. In feudal Japan, breaking the ultimate social code such as turning against a lord or master triggered a fate designed specifically for public involvement. The accused was placed inside a wooden enclosure or buried up to their shoulders right next to a busy roadway. Beside them lay a blunt saw made of coarse bamboo. Every passerby was expected to stop and draw the coarse blade across the person's neck. This mechanism was deliberately inefficient. It was not built for speed. It was designed for duration, maximum visibility, and total community participation. The crowd did not just watch the consequence, they actively carried it out. One recorded instance involved a legendary marksman who attempted to eliminate a powerful warlord from a hidden position. He missed his target, vanished into hiding for 16 years, but was eventually tracked down. The warlord had never forgotten. The marksman was brought to a public road, buried to his shoulders, and subjected to the slow, brutal ritual until the end. By later eras, even official enforcers began pushing back against the extreme cruelty of the act. A compromise was eventually struck. The saw remained as a symbolic warning, but the actual sentence was completed swiftly through standard methods before the public. Ceremony took place, crossing over to medieval Europe. Treason against the crown carried a punishment so complex that it was divided into distinct, calculated phases. People often think of standard executions, but the full sentence recorded in English law was an extended step-by-step process. Each phase represented a specific offense. Being dragged through the streets on a wooden frame addressed the act of betrayal itself. Hanging addressed the disruption of public peace. Further dismantling of the body targeted plotters who sought to overthrow authority, while the removal and destruction of internal organs represented the absolute cleansing of corrupt motives. In the mindset of the era, dangerous ideas were believed to originate within the core of the body, meaning those parts had to be completely eliminated. This multi-stage sentence was applied to notable historic figures who challenged central authority, including regional leaders and political rebels. Their physical remains were frequently divided and dispatched to distant cities across the realm, positioned on spikes at heavily traveled gateways and bridges. The physical remains were transformed into undeniable political warnings for anyone contemplating a similar path. When one famous conspirator was brought to the platform years later, he managed to leap from the ladder at the last moment, ending his life instantly and avoiding the long-staged ordeal that was meant to follow. The goal of the state was never just to remove an opponent, it was to turn their body into an unmistakable public statement. By the late 18th century, new ideas began to sweep across Europe. The promise was total equality before the law, the exact same consequence for every individual, regardless of wealth or title. Advanced mechanical devices were introduced to ensure rapid, uniform outcomes that did not depend on the skill or mood of an enforcer. For a brief moment, it appeared that traditional, drawn-out methods were a thing of the past. However, when civil conflict reached its peak in regional strongholds, the standard apparatus simply could not process people fast enough. Local authorities turned to massive, improvised methods along major rivers. Hundreds of individuals were crowded onto flat-bottomed vessels, fitted with hidden trapdoors below the waterline. Once the boats reached deep water, the hatches were opened, allowing the current to flood the hold instantly. Anyone who attempted to escape was met by armed guards lining the shores. Thousands perished in the cold river currents over a single winter. The official who authorized the operation even used polished, bureaucratic terminology to describe the mass drowned hulls, attempting to make the practice sound administrative and routine. Eventually, political tides turned once again, and that very same official was brought before the standard mechanical blade, meeting the exact system he had bypassed, moving into the mid-20th century. The state's approach to betrayal shifted from public displays to calculated psychological breakdown. Following a failed high-profile plot against a central head of state in 1944, the response was direct and systematic. Investigators swept through every personal connection, seizing thousands of people based on simple letters or casual acquaintances instead of quiet proceedings. The accused were brought before special political tribunals where presiding officials routinely degraded them on film. Defending oneself was impossible. To ensure complete humiliation before the final moment, individuals were stripped of basic necessities. Their belts, structural attire, and personal items were removed, forcing them to struggle just to stand upright in front of the cameras. The physical end was deliberately prolonged using simple overhead cords, creating a slow, agonizing drop rather than a swift conclusion. Recordings of the proceedings were documented for top officials, though the footage was ultimately deemed too grim for broad release. Thousands lost their lives during the purge, demonstrating that the process was engineered as much for total personal degradation as it was for political removal. The nature of targeted removal underwent its most radical evolution. Direct physical force was replaced by advanced chemical and radiological precision. In late 2006, a former high-ranking security officer who had defected to another country sat down for tea at a quiet, upscale hotel lounge. Unbeknownst to him, a microscopic dose of polonium-200 tenarare, highly regulated radioactive isotope produced only in specialized nuclear facilities, had been slipped into his beverage. Short-range alpha particles that cannot penetrate human skin or travel more than a few centimeters in air, making it completely invisible to standard security scanners and radiation detectors. It has no taste, no odor, and gives no immediate warning. However, once a microscopic trace enters the bloodstream, those same alpha particles strike internal organs at close range, systematically destroying cellular structures from within. Medical staff were initially baffled as the victim's health deteriorated rapidly over 3 weeks, with targeted therapy rendered entirely useless. Looking back across thousands of years, a clear pattern emerges. In ancient Persia, implementing a fatal sentence required weeks, wooden structures, and harsh environmental conditions. In feudal Japan, it required a slow, community-driven public ritual. In medieval Europe, it took a multi-stage public event designed to turn a body into a regional warning. By the modern era, the entire process was reduced to a fraction of a milligram of invisible material inside a warm drink, leaving almost no immediate physical trace at the scene. While the tools and technology have evolved from massive physical displays to microscopic precision, the core underlying message remains unchanged throughout human history.